Ta-da. All right. So, hi, everyone. We are here, Three Principles Book Club and Roundtable with Ankush Jain, and we're going to talk about his book, Sweet Sharing. I wasn't sure. I mean, we're always pretty loose with our oops, that's too low, with our formulations. Wow. Clearly, I've forgotten how to work my chair there. So I've been sort of thinking about how I wanted to go about conducting this one, because they've all been learning experiences for me. And what I thought was, rather than me sort of pull things out of the book like I've done in the past, I would ask Ankush some questions about his thoughts on the book and how it came into being. And then after we do that, we would allow people to, not allow, but we'll have people ask questions about anything that's particular. You okay, Penny? Hold on.
Might want to mute all.
Yeah. I'm just
picked up the box and it opened.
Where is that magic book? Penny, do you think I could get you to mute yourself?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Okay. We thought maybe you'd had a crash or something there. Okay. All right. There we go. There we are. So anyway, that's kind of
people are just falling over themselves to read the book. Apparently,
really, yeah. We better get started, man. So like I was saying, I thought that what we would do is I have some sort of general questions that, because I know this is Ankush's first book, and my guess is that many of us on the call have thought about writing books. So my interest in the questions, or the questions that I'm going to ask, are more about concept, about the book itself. And then if you have questions specific to the book, we'll have them come organically from you guys. Is that cool? Nod. I mean, I can see some of you nod if that's cool. All right, it's cool. So Kush, welcome. Why did you write the book?
You know, for many years I didn't write a book. Actually, it was more kind of, why did I not write a book? And you know, even before I became a coach, people would say to me, "You should write a book." I always had opinion on stuff, and thoughts on things. But when I got into coaching, I thought, I will know when it's time to write a book. I'll just know. And I don't know, it was kind of 2016, towards the end of 2016, one of my clients actually wrote a book and said he'd like to send me a copy. And it just occurred to me, now's the time to write, and not hold back anymore. And then it kind of just really unfolded, you know, because for a long time I thought, well, I didn't know what to write. And then it felt like, okay, now's the right time to write a book. And then I really wanted to sit down and have a think about what do I want to say that's not already been said? Because I didn't want to just write another Me Too book. I didn't want to just write a book for the sake of writing a book. I wanted to write something that I thought would be helpful and useful. And the way that I coach is often a lot of storytelling. And I really like telling stories, and I like listening to stories, and I like reading books that are full of stories. And I hadn't read a lot of that in the principles world. And also, one thing that I found is, when I was gifting books or asking clients to read certain books about the principles, they would read those books, but they'd kind of come back with, I don't get what the big deal is. So you're feeling, you're thinking, so what? Like, what? Who cares? You know, like they weren't really seeing the implications of this understanding. And so those two things combined really drove the book forward, in terms of a lot of stories, but stories about implications, how an understanding of the principles doesn't just, it's not like a nice thing to learn, like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but actually understanding the principles for me had very, very concrete implications in my life, and continues to have. I mean, the book could have literally been twice as long with more and more implications, but I wanted to give a real cross-section of different scenarios where an understanding of how our mind works helped both me and all my clients.
Cool, man. Yeah, I was just talking to my partner Julie about it, and it's really relatable. I mean, there's stuff like everything that you talk about, every implication that you talk about, I think is something that everyone on the planet has some level of experience with, which is what I found. I found that to be very cool. So who's the book for?
You know what? It's when I was dedicating the book, I dedicated it to my former and current clients. You know, that's just what made sense. And the book is it's kind of a book that I wish I'd read. Everything that I do when I create a training event or when I'm writing something, often it's I like to share things that I wish someone had told me. So that's kind of what the book was. But I didn't write the book in a maybe more typical way around, okay, I've got a niche and a market and it's going to be for this audience, and you know, I'm going to sell this many copies of it or anything else. It really was just something that I wanted to create. I didn't know how it would be received, and I thought, you know, could this be valuable first and foremost to, you know, would it have been helpful for me? I think yes. And going forward, would it be helpful to people that I have conversations with? I think absolutely yes. And so that's kind of was the idea behind writing the book and who's it for. Having said that, the people that have been reading it has been much broader than I anticipated. So it's been really surprising to me, the number of people who are kind of family members or acquaintances who I've really not had conversations about coaching with or what I do for a living at all, who have contacted me and said, hey, we saw your book came out, we wanted to buy it. Wow, that's really interesting, or that was really impactful, or we really enjoyed it. So it's kind of gone out to a much broader audience than I anticipated. Kind of former work colleagues have bought it and enjoyed it, and you know, and I think it's generic enough to appeal to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's the sense that I got again when I was just talking to Julie about it. It has this. It's just relatable. Like every single page has something on it that anyone at any given time is going to be able to look at and take from the page to their life and find an implication or find an example of that. It's neat. Well, I'm glad it's having a wider reach. Is there anyone that's read it that you were surprised that they read it?
Tons of people.
That really blew you away?
Tons of people. I mean, really loads of people. People, like I said, who were acquaintances who the only way they could have found out about the book was maybe seeing it on Facebook, and I didn't even realize they were probably Facebook friends with me. Right. You know, and then I get an email out of the blue saying, hey, I got your book, I read it, you know, really was impacted by it or really surprised by it. So yeah, I mean, there've been tons of stories of and emails that I've got, and I've shared some of them online, but you know, there are a whole load more that I've had from people that I just, like I said, I surprised me, didn't expect it. I had one guy that I might have spoken to years ago, you know, through Facebook. Hadn't spoken to this guy for years, and he messaged me and he said, this is the best 3P book. I've read all of them, nothing landed with me, read this one, now I kind of get it, which just blew me away. And just loads of little things like that, you know. And this was someone who I might have connected with in 2015, right. Have had no interaction with for 4 years. Super. And then out of the blue sends me a message, hey, I read your book and this is what impact it had on me.
I'd like to think that if I ever wrote a book, one measure of its success would be exactly what you've just described. People out of the blue who I'd long forgotten about as maybe strong, but having an impact on those people that you're not expecting. Well, that you're not expecting. I got to ask, what did your dad think of it?
Yeah, I mean, he was super proud. I think you saw the post that I wrote about. Yeah, just really proud about it. Different to my mom. My dad was proud. My mom felt very vulnerable because it's a very open book. So she took her time reading it. Actually, the same was with my sister, because they felt very vulnerable on my behalf. You know, going through the book and you know, my mom was like, you're my baby, and you know, it's all out in the world. But yeah, my dad was very proud.
Oh, very cool, dude. What I mean, these are all similar questions, but what is your hope for takeaway for people? Like, people read their book. What's the best case scenario for you? What do you hope for them to get?
For me, I hope it's a jumping off point.
Mm.
You know, that because I don't think that I don't think anyone could write a book that is just right. You read this one book and that's it, and then you never need to read anything. Throw all your other books away and that's it. But like I said, it's a book of implications. And for me, the best case scenario is that it's a jumping off point for people to do further exploration. Both for people who might have some exposure to the three principles, and also for those people who have no exposure to the three principles. And I found that on both sides, actually. So there've been people who've read the book who never read a 3P book before in their lives, and they're like, oh wow, this is really interesting, and I didn't think about that, and I can relate to that. And so that's been really cool. And then there've been other people who have been around the three principles potentially for a while, maybe read other books, but has maybe opened them up to there's something more to see than perhaps they were seeing at that time. And both of those people going in deeper, to me, is a win. You know, because I know for me, my first, you know, and I write about this, my first kind of weekend with Garrett and Jamie was really powerful. And I was like, great, now what? What else is there to learn? And 6.5 years later, I'm still learning, you know, and I sometimes would take that for granted, that I was seeing more and seeing more and seeing more and changing and growing. And I think that, you know, and what's been interesting, I had a client of mine who worked with me for a while, stopped working with me, read the book, and in the meantime he'd kind of gone, yeah, I get this 3P stuff, gone off in a totally different direction, then read the book and came completely back. And now he said, I'm so grateful you wrote the book, because it reminded me what I was learning beforehand and how much more impactful it was.
Oh, cool.
So that was very cool to me, and it's kind of, he's kind of now jumped in deeper and seeing more about what there is to see around how our mind works. And seeing implications in so many different areas that he wasn't seeing before.
Yeah, I imagine that would be very rewarding. That's excellent. That feels good, Kush. Tell us, I don't know how to phrase this, but can you tell us a little bit about your process of writing? Like, just practically, how did you get started? How did you develop chapters? My curiosity, Kush, is, how did you decide, pardon me for a second, there's some ambient noise here. How did you decide what to include and what to exclude?
Well, you know, this is my process, right? I would sit down at the computer, I would not know what to type typically, and I would start typing.
Right.
And then a chapter would appear, and that was it. And then I would send the chapter to my coach, and I would send a chapter to my wife. And then I would go to bed. It was the last thing at night I would do before I'd go to sleep.
Oh, cool.
And I pretty much did that Monday to Friday, sometimes Monday to Thursday, because sometimes we're traveling on Friday to either my parents or my wife's parents. But yeah, that was it. I wouldn't write a chapter of the weekend because it's my weekend off, and then back to work. And within a few months, the book kind of was, or the manuscript, I should say, was there. And then when we went through the editing process, I added more to it, and my editor asked me to expand on certain things, and I added a few more chapters. And it was really interesting because people would tell me that, and then you would take things away. And I was not looking forward to that, because I was like, I've put so much into this, like, almost feels like a waste to take certain chapters away. But I was totally open to it, knowing that that would just be part of the process. And when we came down to it, I removed 0 chapters, right? Which I was surprised at. But, I should say the editor I used is not an editor who is, got a deep understanding of the 3 principles. He had some vague understanding, but not really a deep understanding. And that was really helpful for me, because I wanted someone who wasn't familiar with the material to really question and say, well, do you mean that, or do you mean this?
Right.
And help me be more articulate around what I was saying. So he was great, and I really trusted him a lot in the process, that if he thought something was not suitable or whatever else, and we take it out. What we did do is we did merge a couple of chapters that were similar into a longer chapter potentially, and we moved one chapter out into something else, but really it was pretty much what was there, and the editing process was more of a case of expanding and explaining better and a few more examples. But I remember speaking to Dickon Bettinger when I started writing the book, and Dickon, his advice, I said, "You got any advice?" Because he'd just written Coming Home, and he said, "Yeah, just allow the book to unfold."
Right.
And that's pretty much what I did. Now, sometimes I would have an idea, and it wasn't the evening, so I'd make a note, but then I'd sit down and I'd be like, "Oh, I can't remember what that was about," and I just start writing anyway, and it would just unfold.
So it sounds a little bit like, for anyone who's out there and wants to write a book, it's start and see what happens. Is there anything missing? The book is complete and it's wonderful. I mean, I've read it. Some of us in the book club probably read the darn thing. I know Dominic did, right, Dominic? Kush, is there anything that's missing from the book? Now that it's complete, is there anything that you wished you would have added?
I'm really happy with how it's turned out. I'm very happy with the responses and everything I've got on the book. I did get asked. Been asked a few questions, so I've made some notes, and they may form a second book, or they may go into a second edition. I'm not yet sure, but I'm happy. I don't have any regrets about the book. I know one of my clients asked me about what do I actually mean by the word misunderstanding, which I thought was very self-explanatory. And then I wrote a little post on Facebook about it, which he found, and I pointed him to it, and he said that was really helpful. So I might include that in another edition. I think that probably would be really helpful. And I've just assumed that people know what the word means, or my interpretation of that word. Right. But my editor said this as well. He goes, you could keep on writing forever. It's that kind of topic, and I see more and more implications every day, and even chapters that I've already written about the topic, there's more and more examples of that as well. So there's certainly more I could write. In terms of what I'm pretty sure I will add to another edition is something around misunderstanding, but no, I'm surprised actually. I thought I would release the book, and then I would think, oh man, why did I do that? And I need to add this. And I felt like there would be more of a, it's kind of good enough for now. But actually, I've been surprised at how happy I am with the finished product and how well it's been received.
Good answer, man. Nicely done. So this is sort of my last question, I guess, is what did you take from writing the book?
Well, it was the biggest project I've ever undertaken. I've never undertaken something which has taken so long and required so many hours of my time and energy. So it was just a real great sense of accomplishment to have written it and put it out there. I think if I wrote another book, it would happen much quicker, and I understand the process much easier, and so obviously it simplified doing it again. But yeah, it was kind of great, really getting clear, and especially when I was editing the book, really getting clear around what I say and what am I pointing people to, and my own understanding. And it actually evolved. So when I started writing the book to when it was released, the final edit, I was actually tightening up some of the wording as my own understanding was getting clearer around what I really mean and what I don't mean. So that was a great takeaway in terms of the content. And then, like I said, as a project, it was really rewarding and to prove to myself, I can do something like this,
right.
And get it out into the world.
Do you have a favorite chapter?
I don't actually. There's certain chapters I remember more than others, and certain chapters I get drawn to. But what's really interesting actually is when people have been contacting me, they'll typically contact me and say, I really liked this chapter, or I really liked this chapter and this chapter, and there is no consistency. Every single person that has contacted me has been drawn to different chapters. I guess what's more landed with them and what's drawn them in. So there were certain experiences that were more powerful. The forgiveness chapter, that was kind of massive for me.
Right.
I remember that was such a big shift when I was having that conversation with Keith Blevins. It was really powerful and something that sticks with me today. And then the story about being spat on, I mean, that was something I couldn't even talk about for so long, for years. I had this great sense of shame around it. But again, that was really interesting that now it's out and I don't really feel anything about it at all, but, being out in print. But no, I wouldn't say, there's certain things. I think the book, again, this wasn't in the first manuscript, but when I went through it and edited it, I feel it's got much more of a flow to it and much more of it kind of connects better as opposed to just random thoughts, which is a bit more what the first manuscript was.
Well, and that would be typically how it works. I mean, even, thinking back to writing essays at school, I mean, they start off general and then they become more and more as you edit and as you reformulate and formulate, they tighten up, right? It's cool. Kush, before we open up for questions, and what I'm going to do is ask people to raise your hand if everyone knows how to do that on Zoom. I think we've got 19 people. If you click on participants, I think you have the same stuff in front of you where it says manage participants, or do you not see that? There should be, yeah, thanks, Dominic's nodding there, where it says participants. You can click on that, a drop-down list will come up. You'll see your name there. And then where is it now? Somewhere in there is a raise your hand option. And
Our version has it.
your version, okay, good, because I'm looking for it in mine and I don't have it, but I'm the host, so I guess not. So let's do questions. And Dominic, to put you on the spot, seeing as how you are unmuted, do you want to get us going? Can we do that?
Sure. I think you said this. So first of all, just comments, and I know I've made comments in some of the posts. But what I really appreciated about this book was the succinctness of the chapters. So it was tight, and so you didn't get lost in it. The way the chapters were, there was something in there, and it was very succinct, and you could kind of get through it. And so that was quite powerful, because sometimes in some books it'll move on and cover so many things, and then I'm not sure where I am anymore. So I really appreciated that. And then as well, even within the chapters, like I found this because of my highlighting, is you would get to some point where there's one or two sentences which were just, it just made the statement. It was like perfectly clear. And you could read that, and to me it was like, yeah, that resonates as true. Like, yeah, that's true, right? So it sort of kind of hit you with that. So I love the way that worked. And I guess a couple of questions about it. So one thing, by the way, just as an aside, how long did it take to write?
So the manuscript took me 3 months to write, but the manuscript was about 30,000 words. The final book is, I think, 55,000. I was surprised actually how much it grew. I didn't expect that. So the writing took 3 months. The editing took about 2 years, but I wasn't actively editing for 2 years. I would kind of have a little go, leave it, come back again, go. But then it really came together when I hired a proper editor, and then that took me about 6 months, because then we had a little system of going back and forth.
Oh, okay. So the writing then, but wow, okay. So 2 years in the editing, and then that was because there was an editor. So that's the other question. So the editor, and they didn't know 3P. Was there anyone else who, did anybody else input as well? Like even just like from a 3P perspective, and whether that. Yeah.
So there were a few other people that inputted. So there was, I worked a little bit with a lady who was a writing coach, Christy Gonzalez. I forgot her surname. So we worked together for a little bit before I hired my editor, and she was kind of coaching me a little bit around what makes good writing, and that was after I read the book, but that was helpful. And the chapter about being spat on came from that. And so there were a few other chapters that I rewrote based on what she said, so that was helpful. And then from a 3P perspective, the only person sign off that I personally wanted was Keith Blevins. And so I sent him the original manuscript, and he had a bit of a read through that. But then when I edited the whole thing and we got the final version, or close to a final version, I sent it to him again, and we had another quite a long conversation about it. And so there were one or two points that he suggested, but I was actually surprised at how few things he suggested. I was expecting him to go, "You're not seeing this and this and this," but it was quite nice, and I really appreciate the feedback you've given me about the succinctness, because when I was writing it, and especially when I was editing it, I was very careful to not make generalized statements that weren't true. You know, because I thought I can't get away with it in a book. You know, like people can point me to my words. So I was very careful to really have a think about, like, what is really true here. What can I say, and what isn't true? What's maybe a truism? And so I was very careful about that. Chantel Burns also gave me a couple of pointers. But yeah, the main content reviewer, if you like, was Keith Blevins.
Okay, and maybe just the final thing, it may have come out in the way you've said it now, but how did it go from these? It's not that they're random thoughts, but if you're writing, a chapter a day or something like that, so you've got these things, and then to something that, we read it and it comes together and it's saying something. Like, how did that happen?
Well, to be fair, Christy really helped me with that. So I got some feedback in 2016. So I wrote the chapter and I sent it to a few people. I wrote the manuscript, sent it to a few people, and I sent it to Maurice Bassett, who publishes a lot of Steve Chandler's books. And I was really interested in what he had to say, and he was quite critical, right? Which I'm very grateful for now. At the time I was like, but he was very critical about the book, in terms of, he said it's too raw, it needs a bit more, and there were certain things that he said, and so that's probably why it took me a bit longer editing it. And Steve Chandler said to me, "Well, he's got a point, and you can release the book now, and it will still be a good book." And but I wanted to make sure if I released it, I wanted to release a better version of it than something that will just do. And so I work with, my conversations with Christy were helpful around, what can I have that flows through the book? And what I realized in the original manuscript, the first chapter was great, but I didn't reference it at all in the rest of the book. And so one of the things that I did in the editing process was realize it makes sense to refer back to that, because that's the kind of statement I'm starting off with in the book, that this was about kind of me going back to that childlike place. And so just adding some of those references back to the first chapter helped that flow. And there's a lady called Leslie San, I don't know if you know her, she wrote a book, and she wrote something which, again, she references back to the first chapter through the book, and that's kind of where I got that idea from.
Thanks.
Super cool. Thanks, Dominic. Kush, I don't know if you can answer this, but you said that Keith was your main guy in the 3P world for feedback. And you said he offered a few suggestions. Are you able to share what he suggested, or how that came about?
I can't remember. I can't remember what they were, but I remember they were just about tightening up some of the language. So, right. Like Dominic was saying, really sticking to what's true, and that's something I really appreciate about Keith himself, that he is very specific. And he and I have had some conversations around, what can we say as three peers, that really isn't true. It can be misinterpreted. Like, what are we actually saying? So, he would say to me about looking for a good feeling, he would say, well, yeah, look for a good feeling, but is that what we're saying? Because that can mean so many things to so many people.
Yeah.
And he would find holes in that. Like, if that's the only thing that we're saying, just look for a good feeling. Well, what about when we're egotistical? Sometimes it can feel really good when we're full of ego, right? It can feel really good when we're gossiping about someone. It's not, now people can talk about quality of feeling, but it's a little bit gray. It's really difficult to, wrap our hands around. But we're talking about what's inside out and outside in. That's very factual. That's very black and white. So I really appreciated in my conversations with him about sticking to what's factual, sticking to what's really true, because that helped me personally, and it helped me, with my own clients when I was working with them, because when I started out coaching from a 3P perspective, I would say certain things like that, and I realized I was on a bit of shaky ground, because they would question it. And they would go, well, what about this? But what about this? And I wouldn't really have an answer. And I was doing the best that I could. But then, working with Keith, it was really helpful, because I got clearer and clearer on terms of what I'm actually saying and what the principles are pointing to, and really what is true, which gave me a much more solid foundation with which to stand on. But then also I liked explaining it in the book in a way that was very relatable and not so dry, so to speak.
That's cool. Good answer. Thank you, Kush. Do we have, let's questions. Don't be shy, folks. I'll start picking names out soon. I see you, Arvin. I know Arvin always has a question. No pressure.
Actually, I don't have a question now, but I'm glad that Kush actually wrote this book, though, because before I got to get to know about the three principles, I read some three principle books, which didn't even make sense to me. If I had read something like this, very specific toward what exactly is happening, it would have been a lot more easier for me to say, this is going to help me out a lot. Instead of the theory and the metaphors and all that stuff, this is a very specific way of dealing with your situations, right? So this book actually make a lot more sense than a lot of other books that I have read before. It's pretty cool, Kush.
Thank you. I really
Nice.
appreciate that.
Nice. Thanks, Arvin. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot there, man. There we go. You've got it. You've got us started now. Okay, so Hans, you were next. I'll just say your name, and Hans, if you unmute yourself, we'll go from there.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I really liked the book, and it was an easy read, and I like the short chapters and one topic at a time. But there's one thing that stuck with me, and that was chapter 23. There are no exceptions, and I'm sort of not seeing the logic in it. I can see that experience is 100% inside out, that the creation of my experience is coming from the inside. But after that, I still make choices in life. I want to do this and not that, and I like certain people and I don't like certain people, and there's a lot of stuff going on outside that has impact. So I'm yeah. Is that making any sense?
Well, I thank you for asking the question. I'll try and answer. I'll say some stuff, and maybe that will be helpful. Maybe not. What was really helpful for me was when I was pointed to the fact that it works one way 100% of the time, right? 100% of my experience of life is created, via mind, thought, and consciousness, moment to moment. 100%. Because when it's 100%, again, there are so many implications of that, right? Because I had exceptions, right? It was, if someone used a certain word, that was an exception, right? That would make me angry and upset. If someone was a certain way, then that would make me feel a certain way. Like, there were just loads of exceptions. Like, and I talk about them in the book. Like, my boss not giving me a lot of positive feedback when I'd done a good job, that was an exception. Well, that my personality is a kind of person that, well, of course I'd feel upset about that. There's nothing I can do. Or racism, if someone called me a racist word, derogatory word, well, of course I'm going to get upset. That wasn't an exception in my mind. That's just the way it worked. That's the way it was. And I had so many of these things. And when I started to see that there are no exceptions, that was very, very freeing for me. And seeing that it works one way doesn't mean that we can't have preferences. And I was reading a book recently, which I really like. It's not a 3P book. It's a more traditional self-help book, but it talked about the difference between preferences and addictions, which to me is inside out versus outside in, right? So this book was saying, an addiction is around goals, and this is about goals and outcomes and what you want to achieve. And what it was saying is, it's an addiction when, if we don't achieve the goal, then we're going to get upset or unhappy or whatever, or we put so much on the goal coming true. Like, we really believe that achieving or not achieving the goal is going to have an impact on how we feel. And a preference is, if we achieve it, that's cool, right? And if we don't achieve it, that's okay too, right? Like, I might have a preference for chocolate ice cream, but if I go into the freezer, I know I've only got vanilla, that's okay, right? That I can have a preference. But if I kind of kick the freezer door down and I like throw it out the window or something, like, what is this? I can't believe there's no chocolate ice cream. Yeah, then I've got something on the outcome, right? Then I'm addicted, which is basically outside in. You can't be addicted to an outcome unless you believe the outcome has some impact. Those circumstances has an impact on how you feel. But you can have preferences, right? You can see the world 100% as inside out and have preferences completely. And I see this so much in my relationship with my wife, more than anywhere else, right? I used to live in a world in terms of relationships, in addiction, in outside in, right? That this girl or girls in general or something around, if they make me, if I get this girl, or if she likes me, or if I get a girl who's like this, if she makes me feel a certain way, like if I get her, she'll make me feel a certain way. Or if she leaves me, then I'm going to feel a certain way. And when I got introduced to the principles, a lot of that addictive thinking just fell away. So what I got left with was, I met my wife and, this is cool, but there was nothing on it. And at the beginning, and actually for a lot of our relationship, I would sometimes think, is this love? Because in my head, I was confusing love with addictive behavior, addictive feelings, right? And what I see now is that I have a preference to be married to my wife, but I really don't have anything on it. It's kind of weird because it's the first time in my life that I've ever had a relationship like this. And what happens is, does that mean I don't care about her? No, I really love her to pieces. Does that mean I wouldn't be bothered if we split up? I probably would, right? But I don't have a lot on it. And so what happens is, this is the first relationship I've ever been in where I'm not needy and insecure. And that makes for a much stronger foundation of a relationship. I can't remember if I wrote this in the book, but, before we were getting married, we were engaged. My wife and I were talking one day, and she was looking at me lovingly. And I said to her, I really love you. And, you know, I know that none of my loving feelings have got anything to do with you. And she looked at me and she kind of went, if you're trying to be romantic, you're failing miserably. And I said to her, well, hear me out. This is a really good thing. And let me tell you why. If we go into this marriage and I feel like my good feelings have something to do with you, I said, most marriages, do they go through a rocky patch? If we're going to be married for the next 30, 40 years, are we probably going to go through a rocky patch at some point? And she thought about it and she said, yeah, most couples I know go through a rocky patch. I said, right. So if we're going to go through a rocky patch, because that's life at some point, if I think my good feelings are coming from you, when we go through that rocky patch, it will not look like my good feelings are coming from you. And then our relationship's really going to be, you know, on rocky ground. But if I know my good feelings and my bad feelings have nothing to do with you, if and when we go through that rocky patch, we've got a much more solid foundation on which to stand. And I don't know if she really got it, but she kind of just nodded and maybe saved the argument. But I really see that being so true for us, and certainly for me with her, because it gives me my bearings. It gives me that solid foundation. And by the way, this is true in every area of my life. This is true with money. You know, for years, I really thought I needed to make a lot of money because then I would feel good enough. Then I would feel something. And, you know, you can say I was addicted to that. I was addicted to the outcome. And so guess what? I had a lot of insecurity. I had a lot of fear. And I wouldn't go for certain jobs. I wouldn't go for business opportunities because I was so scared of messing it up, because I really placed so much on the outcome. Now, when I realize it's just money, right? Like, it's just money. It really is. And I can't believe I'm saying that, because for so many years I would never have said that. But the more I see it's just money, and if I make £1 million, right, or 10 million pounds, I am literally not going to feel any different. The only thing I will feel is my thinking moment to moment. And I've seen that as my coaching income's grown. I don't feel any different. It's the same. The outside cannot affect the inside. Well, I've been freer to create more. I've been freer to make more money because I don't have an addiction. I don't have anything on it. So just to kind of wrap that up, realizing it works 100% one way, it's really helpful. It doesn't mean you turn into a robot. You can still have preferences. It just means you're not addicted to the outcome. So does that answer anything?
Yeah, and that leads me to think that it's important to explore what my preferences are. If I only see it 100 inside out, and then there's no fun out there, because it doesn't matter. But if I want to play with what's my preference in this area and this area, and I don't have anything on it, it becomes very powerful. Then the whole life is in that, I think, to find out what are my preferences, and that's outside, and the key is not to have anything on it, because it's inside out.
I think this is a topic that we could probably continue with, but with our limited time. Hans, if that's okay, can we, Kush, are you okay? I mean, if you want, do you want to address Hans's comment?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing very, very quickly, and that is, I don't feel like I need to explore my preferences, because the less I've been outside in, my mind has naturally got quieter. And so there's more, I'm more aware, I'm more self-aware. So my preferences just are so much more obvious than they ever were. And, you know, there's no inside out, outside in. Outside in doesn't exist. So preferences are just thoughts. So that's also inside out, right? It's the preferences are thought generated. So everything is inside out. And I found life is way more fun when I'm inside out. The more I see it being inside out, the more fun I have, the less stressed I am, the less I have on things. And I like you, I love the question because I wouldn't have seen that for myself years ago. I would have been thinking about the same things. But, you know, explore, again, for my book, I say to people, explore this for yourself. You don't need to take my word on it. See this for yourself. The more you see it's inside out, does life get more fun or less fun?
All right. Thanks, Hans. Thanks, Kush. Penny, you're up to bat, or you're up next. Penny, are you there?
Trying to unmute. There we go.
There we go.
Sorry, couldn't find the unmute button. I don't really have a question, Kush, but I just wanted to thank you again for the book, and also to say that one of the things I love about it is I've gone back to it and just read specific chapters. So I've been struggling with something, or something's come up in a conversation, and I've gone back and just dipped into one chapter and sort of gone over it again, and it's clarified things for me. So that's why I love the format of the book so much. The two chapters that were big for me was the forgiveness chapter and the acceptance chapter. But I have dipped in and out of the book many times, and I just love the format, because sometimes some of the 3P books, it's hard to do that. You're sort of rummaging through passages trying to find what you're looking for, and with your book it's really easy to find it because the headings lead you directly into it. So I just wanted to say that I love the format and the book.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Penny. Yeah, just to add a thought onto that, what just occurred to me is a lot of the other 3P books almost require an understanding of the 3Ps to get the value out of the books, and yours doesn't have that feeling to me, Kush. George, you're up. Oh. Hey, George.
Hello, everyone.
There he is.
Can you hear me?
We got you, George.
Hey, George.
Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Yeah, mine is not a question, just a contribution, and it's more or less in line with what most people have said. I enjoyed the book, and I think it's something that will help me in terms of referring or recommending books to my clients. I had the same experience, or a similar experience that Kush had, which was after introducing or sharing certain 3P material with my clients, there were some kind of mixed feedback. So some people were like, most people didn't get what I was pointing to. But I feel like this is it's more approachable. In fact, my mom picked up the book when she came visiting, and she read a few chapters, but the one on forgiveness, she really spoke about it because it's a different way of, thinking about forgiveness, and it made a deep impression on her. And I think it's just a very good resource that can help our coaches to help our clients see what we're pointing to. So I just wanted to thank you, Kush, for the book, and also just say good job.
Thanks, George.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And it's great to see your face for the first time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
good to see you.
Glad you joined us, George. Pramila. There, hold on. Hold on. I think
Gotcha. Right?
we're muting.
Yeah.
Unmuting.
No, I'm unmuted now.
All right, we got you.
Yeah. No, I don't really have a question either, but just to relate my experience of the book. I read it at the beginning. It was a very quick read, so I kind of read through it. And I remember it was really powerful, but then I forgot about it for a couple of months. Not forget about it, and that's it. It was always there, I lent it out to a friend who wanted to read it. Then I got it back a couple of weeks ago. And last night I was just reading it again. I said, tomorrow is let me see if I can find a question. But I didn't have a question. What I experienced last night was I read a lot of chapters, studied again. And through each chapter, I found something that hit me so hard, I was kind of being pushed against the wall. Wake up. And then I read Keith Levin's little thing on the back. It says, like it so it just quietly delivers. And I actually felt that it just quietly delivers. And I just related to that. It was wonderful, really wonderful. Just wanted to say that. Thank you
so much.
Thanks. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, or just anyone else who wants to tell me this is a great book. I don't mind that either.
One thing I wanted to say more. One thing I want to, I'm sorry, I can't hear what's being said.
All you, Pramila, go ahead.
Me? Okay. One more thing I want to say, that each chapter, the way you went through each chapter, and then you got that point across that this is 100%. No matter what the emotion, what the situation, how you brought it back, that once we see this, everything falls in place. All emotions fall in place. Whether it's fear, whether it's love, whether it's addiction, or what was it? Acceptance. The best one I found was time management. I mean, everything, it just happens. We don't have to work for it. It just happens. And that was the beauty of this book, where it came naturally. It worked.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. Yeah.
Awesome, Pramila. Thank you very much. Anyone else want to just tell Kush he's awesome and make him feel better? No? So if not...
Birdie did. She had her hand up.
I did. Yeah.
Did I miss one? Sorry, Birdie. Go for it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. I'd just like to say thank you to Kush. A brilliant book. And I'll tell you for why. Having worked with Chip and Jan, their message is keep it simple. Be down to earth, where you are, work from where you are at this present moment. And this is what I see in Ankush's book. It's just down to earth, where you are now, with the problems that's going on right now, with the people you're with right now. And that's just perfect for me. Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Lynn had a hand up.
How am I missing these?
Hi, Kush.
Hey, Lynn.
I haven't received my book yet. It's coming this afternoon. My son is flying back from England right now as we speak. I have to leave and pick him up at the airport like in a couple of hours. So I'm really looking forward to reading it now, especially even more so now, listening to this this webinar, this talk. It's yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, it's a good advert, right? All these people.
Exactly.
Kickbacks. So I don't know how I missed the last couple of hands. I have the list in front of me, but
They were just raising their hand visually.
Oh, I'm looking at the. Okay, that makes sense. I'm looking at the list. I've got the full screen on. That explains that.
Could I just also, I was just noticing like where I was highlighting, and I really appreciated you on chapter 25, you said you always have a choice, and choice is a pretty controversial kind of a topic, and I love the way that you presented, like there's a kind of a further perspective you provide here, in that I hadn't thought about it this way, but when you believe that this thing outside is going to make you feel a certain way, then in a way you don't have a choice, because the only way to feel good is because I have to do this activity, or I've got to be with that person today, because that's going to make me feel good. And so you're, without realizing it, and it's easy to sort of get thinking like, well, I can make a choice or whatever. But, when I read this chapter and the point that you made in there, it took it to a different level around choice. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say something on that, Dominic, about the book in general, and that is, and this is maybe more a reflection on me as well. I'm quite a simple person, right? So I read some of these debates on Facebook, and I see some of these interactions, and sometimes my head just hurts. Like I'm just like, what did I don't get it. And so I try and, with the book, just and this is just with anything that I write or try and explain, I just try and explain with what makes sense to me. And so that's kind of what came out of the book, that I didn't want to get too esoteric or too, which I don't anyway, but it was just like, what do I know to be true for me? And that doesn't mean that I won't change my mind. I'm constantly learning and seeing things, but it really was, what's true for me. So with all these chapters like choice and everything else, it was kind of a reflection of, what can I say in really simple English that just seems really true based on what I know.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, thanks, Kush. We've got a minute, trying to stay on the hour.
There's a couple of things I wanted to say, Michael, that I just occurred to me as we were talking based on the questions you asked at the start of this call, and I'd forgot. So one thing you asked me was what feedback did Keith give me?
Yes.
And I remembered one of the things that he said. There were a few things, but one of the things I just recall now what he said was he asked me to review the chapter titles.
Oh.
Right. And originally the chapter titles were very innocuous. It was like money or forgiveness or acceptance. And what Keith said to me is, he said, look, you're saying something pretty strong, like the chapter on racism, right? I think it was originally just called racism. But he said, you're not saying the same things that everybody's saying on those topics. You're saying something that it goes against the traditional view of those topics. And I had overlooked that, and maybe as people that are in the 3P world tend to overlook that too. Mm-hmm. We forget that actually what we're pointing to and the implications of this understanding are actually like 180 degrees. There are totally different directions. So if you take something like racism, the whole world and the media, there's a lot of stuff to address racism, which I'm obviously all for. But it's all based on, racism causes offense. Racism causes you to feel a certain way, right? And we're giving our power away to people. And so that chapter on racism, which was huge for me personally, was like, oh, no, people can say whatever they want and it has no impact on how I feel. And coming from that, it's very radical. I mean, we would approach the whole topic of racism so differently, And so that was one thing he said about, all of those chapters, like not all of it, but he goes, just go through and have a think about it. And so I changed from the chapter titles to be a little bit more direct. And then the other thing was, you asked me who did I want the book to go to or something like that. And I totally forgot about this, but one of the things, and I was reminded by George when he spoke, that, again, a lot of stuff I produce or write or do, keeping it simple. And I would love, for other coaches to deem this worthwhile enough to share with their clients.
Right.
Because I think it's a very good introductory book to the principles. I'm not saying it's the only book or it's the best book, but I think it's a very good introductory book for people who don't know anything about this understanding to really get a deeper look at, well, what's going on here and why is it important?
Yeah, and I think maybe that's what I was trying to articulate when I said that it seems that some of the other readings, some of the other books, you already have to be immersed in the understanding, whereas yours seems to be, it's just, when I read it, it just feels like a beautiful bridge from not familiar with the understanding to, as you said, a jumping off point. So, brilliantly done. Well done. Any last thoughts from anyone? And Ankush, thanks for elaborating on that a little bit. Any closing thoughts or comments or salutations or anything from anyone? Oh, Hans is clapping. All right, cool. Well, why don't we unmute ourselves and we can all clap and say things that we won't really hear, but it'll be fun anyway.
Thanks, Ankush. This was awesome. Great contribution.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ankush.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
So,
Really good.
I will make the recording available in the Three Principles Book Club and Roundtable, probably within the hour. And there are hearts. That's so cute.
Okay, that is just beautiful.
One thing I'd like to say.
Yes,
I've learned to reread a book. Before I used to read it once and put it down, but now I'm going to say, no, this book needs to be reread and read and read and read again.
What an
yeah.
Right on.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Kush is awesome. Kush is awesome.
Of course.
He's not saying.
Are you blushing yet? All right.
No comment. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. As I said, I'll make the recording available in the next hour. And thank you all so much for joining us. And we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us, Kush. Be well. We'll speak soon. Bye, everyone.